Welcome to Main Street Minds with your host, Amish Munshi. This is where industry leaders and seasoned pros share their secrets to success beyond limits. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to Main Street Minds. Today we have a very special guest, Karlo, over here, all the way from New York City, one of my favorite places to live. And today we are going to learn a lot more about one of the most important skills that makes a business successful, right? Having a mobile app, having an iOS and an app that actually makes a lot of businesses successful. So without further delay, let me open up the floor. Karlo, you want to introduce yourself and share how you reached the level of
Sure.
success where you are right now?
Yeah, thanks, Amish. I'm Karlo Kilayko. I've been around for a while. I currently pretty much specialize in iOS development. Um, I did start my career many years ago in the game industry as a game programmer. Um, One of the things that in order to grow my career, then I started looking more at the business side of games and got into production, which in the game industry, a producer is a lot like a product manager in other areas. So I did that for a while. And that actually culminated. I was the executive producer at THQ Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And I mention this because that was my first foray into mobile development. And it was very exciting. I was actually pretty burned out on PC and console games. And so the mobile stuff was a breath of fresh air. And this is in the very early, this is maybe like 2003, 2004, way before the iPhone and way before Android. Um, and these games were just awesome. They were old school, top down, 8-bit. I loved them. But we used to, with THQ's licensed material and other IP that we had available, we would make about 120 titles a year, and
Wow.
we would have to port those across 380 some devices. And each one had to have its own test suite done. So the QA process was actually much longer than the development process for these games. Um, but that was great. THQ reorganized. I went freelance, and I had a really good business for a while, helping people get into games and that didn't know where to start. So there were lots of startups, lots of people with good resources that wanted to make a game, didn't know how to do it. So I really specialized in helping them build their business case, helping them decide on a technology route, and putting together, drawing from my network to put together a tech team and stuff like that, building the MVP and stuff like that. So it was really a lot of fun. And then the iPhone happened. And and almost immediately the whole business model that I was working on changed. And I'll give my favorite example of this. I was working on a game, and it was an iPhone game, one of the first iPhone games, and it was a one of those kind of AI pet, it's like Tamagotchi kind of things, right? And it was for dogs. And the original plan was they would sell an app for each breed of dog for $14.99 each. That was
Oh,
the business plan going into this project. So within 6 months, the plan was it would be one free app with all of the breeds of dogs, and you would buy dog food for 99 cents each.
oh.
And that's how quickly the people's perception of the business and the industry changed. Um, but the iPhone was really great. I was a diehard Nokia guy,
Oh, yeah.
and that was always my favorite phone. I actually was a producer and worked on some of the early N-Gage games for anybody that remembers the Nokia N-Gage. I should have brought one along to
Yeah.
show. That was great fun. But yeah, I finally got an iPhone. And when the SDK for the OS came out, that's when I jumped back into development. And early on, there were some of these cross-platform things that we were chatting about before, and I did explore a lot of those. Um, a lot of times then, as now, even with things like Flutter and React Native, um, the limitations showed up in the edge cases, right?
Mhm.
Uh, One of the most amazing things, and I have on my GitHub, I made a template because I've always loved the location aspects. I was just blown away by this fact that you could like show the user where they are and then do things with that location. Like what was the company Foursquare? They had a game
Yeah.
back in the day.
Yeah.
And it was just tremendous. I love that. That was the best thing to me. And so that's where run into problems with some of the cross platforms. And we can talk about that more later. But anyway, I got into the iOS development. Um, Learned Objective-C,
Yeah.
started doing that for a while, and that actually got me into a role with Skyward, which was after my freelance time. That was my first actual job. I always like to say, my wife said to me, this freelance stuff is fun, but the steady paycheck is even more fun. So why don't you get a job?
Yeah.
So I ended up at Skyward, and Skyward was one of the best experiences. We were actually writing the app on iOS that flew the drone. Uh,
Hmm.
so this was the first piece of software I worked on where a bug or a mistake could physically harm someone.
Yeah.
Because we had an incident in testing where our chief test pilot was flying these two drones and accidentally crashed them into each
Oh,
other, and it was a $20,000 mistake.
ouch. Yeah.
So, it was a lot of fun and had lots of good experiences there. I loved my team. I was hired as a manager, and back at THQ, I was management also. And that ended up being actually one of my strengths was building teams, motivating teams, and leading the teams through difficult times. In the game industry is very common, right? To where you would one project I remember we would crunch me and two developers, we crunched 110 hours for 7 weeks straight.
Hmm.
And to get a game released. And so I've tried to learn from that. But at Skyward, we did have one instance where we took on an audacious goal, and I like to tell this story. Skyward was owned by Verizon,
Hmm.
and I think it was 2021 CES. Hans Vestberg, the CEO of Verizon, was going to do the keynote speech for CES. And so they put the call out to all their little startups and incubators and said, "Hey, what do you have that we can demo? Give us something cool." And
Yeah.
we pitched, and we had a matter of weeks. That was the audacity of it. We
Yeah.
pitched that Hans Vestberg could stand on stage in Vegas with an iPad, hit a button, and it would launch a drone in Los Angeles that would fly a mission and beam the 4K video over their 5G network. They wanted to promote the
Wow.
5G network. So we started on it. It was really hard. We split the team kind of into little vertical fire teams. Everybody worked on their part. I actually wrote the back-end telemetry server myself in
Yeah.
Elixir, which was a lot of fun. I had a lot of help from our DevOps guy to get it deployed and working. And I remember we went out and we did our first field test. Somebody back at the office, my lead engineer, he was there. We were out in the field with the drone in the middle of nowhere, and
Yeah.
he launched that drone from there. And that
Yeah.
was much celebrating. And then when the actual CES we had a live broadcast going, and when
Yeah.
Hans Vestberg hit the button, there was like a 1.5 second pause when they cut to LA, and the drone started up and took off, and my heart started beating again.
Yeah.
And it was just really great. And it was amazing. My team was just so great, and that we pulled that off in that amount of time. And it worked, and it was
Yeah.
really,
And that
really great.
1.5 minute, 1.5 second might have felt like a minute or two saying, is it happening? Is it
Yes.
not happening?
I just threw down my laptop and left the room because I was like, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah.
Um,
Live demos are always so scary and they always
yeah.
fail right when they should not.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I think the key to our success in that was splitting things up and then coming back together periodically, but then testing. The field testing that we did was invaluable. But you're absolutely right. Even when you test a demo, it never goes well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so from then on my career trajectory, I worked for a couple companies that were a bit bigger than Not Worldwide, where I was an engineering manager again for iOS. A company called Stride, where I was also engineering manager for mobile for iOS and Android. Um, And then I kind of had a weird swerve. I got seduced by games again by
Mm-hmm.
a company called Ergata, which they were, like Peloton. They Ergata made a rowing machine, for
Mm-hmm.
fitness. And unlike Peloton, which had classes, Ergata wanted to build games to motivate their users, kind of like Zwift.
Yeah.
Um, and so Ergata put together this really amazing team of game developers, and I was seduced by that. So, but for various reasons I won't go into, it didn't last that long. I don't know how Ergata is doing now. I hope they're doing well. Um, After that, I did a little bit more freelance again. But then I ended up at Bluevine, and I do want to talk about Bluevine a little bit. Um, because one of the things that I found that happened, and so for your audience, this might be kind of a pertinent point. I had progressed in my career to management,
Mm-hmm.
and that was um, that was really great. It was a natural progression. But what I found, especially when I got to the bigger, like the Knot worldwide has their app has millions of users. It's very popular, and we were extremely busy. As a
Mm-hmm.
manager, my primary um, directive is to support my team. Make sure
Mm-hmm.
my team can get their work done, that there are no blockers, no impediments, that they have the tools they need to get their work done. That's the most important thing. And in doing that, um, you find you get further and further from the code.
Yeah.
Um, and so I reached a point where I was worried that my skill set, especially when I made that little detour into the back towards games, which was important for this reason, I really felt like I was not up to the latest stuff. So I made an intentional move to go back as an IC, and I
Mm-hmm.
landed at Bluevine as a senior iOS dev. And it was the perfect match because Bluevine's app was very new. They were not afraid to rewrite their app like 3 times.
Yeah.
And an interesting aside to kind of jump back to what we started with, they initially tried Flutter and they
Mm-hmm.
found its performance and suitability just wasn't there. So they went native
Yeah.
and they built iOS and Android teams. But
Right.
it was all new code, all Swift UI, Swift concurrency, things like that. And it was all the stuff that I really needed to get up to speed on and be comfortable with. And so I was very happy there. Things were going great. The product was amazing. And this is a good segue into another topic that we had mentioned a little bit earlier, is that we found at Bluevine that our daily active users on iOS pretty much equaled web.
Okay.
Android was a distant third,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but the iOS user base was really strong, which surprised me because it's a financial app, it's a banking app.
Yeah.
And you would think most people are going to do that at their desk, on their laptop or something like that, but people were using their phones to do all kinds of financial transactions. And it was really eye-opening to me about the potential
Mm-hmm.
um, for getting your web-based service or application onto mobile. I think it's a
Yeah.
really crucial market that you
Mm-hmm.
can't afford to overlook. Uh,
Yeah.
and so that was Bluevine was a really, really great experience, but they had some struggles and they ended up having about 5 rounds of layoffs. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, and that
Yeah.
brings us to now where obviously I've been around for a long time. So
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
the things I'm exploring now is how to get that message out a little bit more about this this potential demand for
Mm-hmm.
your web app on mobile. It's really strong. And it's funny, just even anecdotally, I know, my wife, she does so much stuff on her phone. I don't understand how do you do that on the little screen, but she
Yeah.
makes it happen. And this is, I see this other places too, where the potential of native iOS experience um, to get your users to give that same experience to your users is really
Mm-hmm.
tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
So
it's
it's
even in my current place, like if I think saying I want to be on the field, but I don't want this laptop with me,
yeah.
right? Like, I wish I could do this on the cell phone. Like even if it's like a simple thing, just yesterday in my CRM on a laptop, I can filter my contacts based on a tag. On a mobile, I cannot. It's just this one
Ah,
specific CRM. I'm not able to do it. I'm sure there are
yeah.
others that will be able to do it, but I'm like, I wish if I could do that, I could be reaching out to like five more people. And
Yeah,
over here I
absolutely.
can't.
Yeah. I think that's a great example. And I think a lot of times that can happen, right?
Yeah,
Um, I've seen, companies where they say, okay, well, we have all these web developers. They use React. We'll just use React Native. But I think, and I'm not that much of an expert, but I think React does not equal React Native.
no.
I think they're
Yeah,
different, and a lot of times people find themselves constrained and they're not able to get those key features in.
yeah.
So that is an important point, is that you have to evaluate the kinds of features that your users will want to use on such a small screen, you know.
Yeah, and it
Um,
like on the field, like outside the tech industry, like if you think like one of the reasons I'm in real estate is I didn't want to be in front of a laptop. Like that's
yeah,
one of the main reasons. I was like, I've done this for 20 years. I should be on my feet doing something physical, real, right? Like that's what got me interested into this. But that's the truth of everyone outside. Like if it's a car salesman, I wish he could take the full application. The person is doing a test drive, like the use cases
yeah,
and the applic. I just wish more businesses do mobile first development, and laptop just or desktop just is available in case if it's needed. But
yeah.
I,
No,
I
I
really think,
I
yeah,
think I think that's a really good point, and it seemed like at a certain point in the evolution of the
yeah,
smartphone industry that that was kind of maybe going to become the trend,
yeah,
where less and less people would use laptops and they would only, or they would do everything on their phone.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fascinating. And I think one of the things that really helped me actually in this kind of perspective and all that is actually my background in games, right? In
Hmm.
games, you have you have only a little bit of opportunity to draw the player in, um,
Yeah,
and keep them attracted. So it's the way you set it up, the way you introduce features, the way you provide the interface for those features is really, really important.
yeah,
And looking at how people do. So somebody like your CRM company should be saying, well, if someone's trying to do this on mobile and they're not able to get to this
yeah,
feature, well, how can we address that? How can we best
yeah.
address that? And I think that's,
Yeah, it's not
it's
technically it's not challenging. It can easily be done. It's just that
yeah,
the mindset is still saying, "Hey, this is all the set of features available on the desktop or a laptop. We are only going to provide a subset of features on a mobile." But the world is different. Everyone
yeah,
there will be a lot more efficiency in business. Like it could, like I used to do security and identity and access management. Somebody is working on a laptop, the two-factor authentication goes on the phone, and 10 minutes I'm on the phone looking at things that I shouldn't be looking at, and my login has timed out. So I send a second push notification, and then again 10 minutes I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing.
That's really funny.
So if
That's a
it's
good
all in one place, it would be so much easier.
right. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. So, hopefully that's something that I can investigate more and promote and see where it can go.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
the other
how?
thing that I would mention too, just touching back on the games, is you know, almost every developer I know has side project, many side projects. So for me, it's always been games
Mhm.
because that's what I know. I have actually never built a website. I don't even know how to build a website.
Yeah,
But if
yeah,
you need a mobile app or a game,
yeah.
I can definitely do that. So yeah, so I was actually back in the day when I was freelance.
Mhm.
I like to tell this story too because it gives legitimacy to my game chops. I When I went indie after THQ, I was going to do everything in my own way. I had to do, I'm going to be truly indie. And back then, 2007, stuff like that. If you would go to the Game Developers Conference and I would be carrying my Mac laptop, people would kind of point and laugh. Said, "Who is that poser with the Mac? You
Yeah,
can't do anything real on a Mac." So
yeah,
I said, when I went indie, I said, "I'm going to do this. Um, I'm going to do everything on the Mac." And I heard about this new thing called Unity.
yeah,
Um, and I actually managed to meet David Helgeson and Joachim Ante, the founders,
yeah.
because I tried to convince them to make an iPhone export because
Hmm.
I was able to get contracts to do iPhone games and I wanted to
Yeah,
use Unity. Um,
yeah.
Because writing a game engine is that's not interesting to me, right?
Yeah.
It's technically a great exercise, but
Yeah.
I want to make the content. I want to make the experience, right?
Yeah.
So a tool like Unity is just amazing. So I have been around Unity, been using Unity now since they actually started. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason that's pertinent to this conversation is because I've recently been trying to learn Godot,
Uh-huh.
which, as many people know, it's very much similar to Unity in a lot of ways, but it's open source. Um, the
Yeah.
scripting language is GD script, which is very Python-esque. I'm not a huge fan of that. Unity now is all C sharp, which to me feels more like a real language. Though
Yeah.
after so many years of doing Swift, I forget to put semicolons a lot, but that's
Yeah.
just one of those things. But yeah, I just wanted to touch back on that because that's it's interesting. I actually talked to a startup here in actually it was in Brooklyn, and they were making a very cool app, which I don't want to disclose too much. And they were looking for help, and they were trying to they needed some sort of way to render lots of different media
Mm-hmm.
quickly, and they were trying to write a custom engine. They were using other like browser-based engines and things like that, and they
Mm-hmm.
were struggling. So I actually suggested that they look at Unity
Mm-hmm.
because Unity or any game engine is going to be super fast at rendering anything you want to the screen
Yeah.
because it uses the GPU for all of that.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting kind of conversation. It's another area where I like to think that I've been able to innovate with knowledge from the game industry
Yeah.
into other areas because the constraints and the performances and the types of technical challenges you have in games are
Mm-hmm.
really, really different. But
Yeah.
sometimes if you find an opportunity to cross over, it can
Mm-hmm.
be really good. It can be very beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so one of the questions I had for you is like, how do you not get distracted by the next shiny object syndrome, right? Like it
That's a
could
great question. Yeah.
a development environment. It could be, hey, why don't we also develop and do Android development? Like, what do you need from a mindset perspective to say, okay, yes, this is going to excel me forward. This
Mhm.
new technology is something worth learning versus something just being the next shiny object that will just take you down a rabbit hole. Say, hey, this is, and you won't be productive. Like, how do you make that decision?
That's a great question. And I'm glad you asked me because I am very susceptible to shiny object syndrome. Um, I really like technology and I love to look at new things and packages and things like that. Like I'm constantly like on LinkedIn is a great place where, I follow a lot of great iOS developers and stuff like that. And they're always introducing new techniques and new things. And
Yeah.
obviously Apple as well is moving Swift in their direction. I have opinions about that too. But to answer your question, I think the thing that you have to do the most, and a lot of times experience is the best tool lever for this, is you have to try to consider what is the longer term benefit of the technology.
Hmm.
So to jump back to my Skyward story where we made the demo, I mentioned that I wrote the telemetry server in Elixir.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever heard of Elixir. I only knew about it because I was a fan of Erlang, and
Yeah.
Elixir is based on Erlang and runs on the Erlang virtual machine. Um, but after we got it running, I remember my lead engineer said to me, "This is the perfect technology for
Hmm.
this purpose." Because Elixir out of the box, you can quickly build. Like I built a quick proof of concept for someone of a quiz game. And so
Hmm.
it's client server. So the client, of course, I built in Swift. It was actually a Mac app because they wanted to be able to run it on a laptop. But the server I wrote in Elixir because
Hmm.
Elixir can handle out of the box with the Phoenix framework like millions of concurrent connections. No
Hmm.
sweat. It doesn't even
Yeah.
bother. And you can't do that with like Swift Vapor would be the next thing if I had to write a server because that's the thing I'm most
Hmm.
familiar with or even Node. I mean, I'm sure people are out there who can do
Yeah.
magic, but Elixir does it out of the box. I don't even have to
Yeah.
think twice about it. So I think
Yeah.
that's an important consideration is how well does this tool, because they're all tools, how well does this tool
Mm-hmm.
solve my immediate problem, and
Mm-hmm.
what's the future of it. And I think it's fine. Like I've taken a class on Go, I've taken Python classes, Ruby on Rails, everything, because I'm curious about it all. I like
Yeah.
to know. I like to,
Yeah.
read the talk. But when it comes down to actually implementing something, I try to look for a tool, a technology that has some backing behind it
Mm-hmm.
and addresses the problem,
Yeah.
and that other people are saying, hey, this really changes this aspect of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think Go is a great example of that. Go came out at a time when maybe things were getting too complicated, and
Mm-hmm.
and there was so much overhead, and things weren't performant enough, and Go said, let's strip it back down. Let's basically go. I started out as a C
Yeah.
programmer, right?
Yeah.
You compare original C in its standard library, with even like Swift or anything, Node or anything like that. It's just amazing. And so Go tried to do that, I think. And I think it was really good. Rust is another good example. They
Mm-hmm.
set out to fix certain things. And if
Mm-hmm.
you look at who's using Rust and how they're using it and why,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like maybe Rust is a good bet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's actually interesting to bring this up. Somewhat controversial,
Yeah.
but especially in the last year, I've been reading more and more complaints about the direction that Swift is going, the
Yeah.
direction that Apple is dragging. Because so Apple open source Swift, but it has a steering committee that is heavily weighed by Apple. Uh,
Yeah.
and so the complexity, when I first started using Swift, it was 2017, and it was a simple, fast alternative to Objective-C, right?
Yeah.
It had a lot of benefits to
Mm-hmm.
use to develop your code. Um, but now, oh my goodness, it's uh, it's become so complicated and so bloated with reserved keywords and property wrappers and things like that.
Yeah.
It's not as much fun anymore, for sure. Some may disagree, but it seems like they've kind of lost maybe a little bit of their direction
Mm-hmm.
without any benefit. They haven't, by increasing this complexity, they haven't really expanded maybe the use case for Swift. Um, they haven't really maybe addressed some of the underlying fundamental things first before adding on all of these new features. So I think that kind of thing, if you look at it,
Yeah.
um, can give you some indication. Oh, Amish, I think we got
Yeah.
cut off.
I think it froze. Yeah, I can
Yep.
see you again. Cool.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
edit that part out.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I didn't
Yeah.
know. Thought I have FiOS. I mean, it should be good, but
Yeah. Sometimes never know, right? It's
yeah.
yeah, stuff happens. That's fine. I'll
Um,
I'll, I'll just remove that 30-40 seconds from it. Yeah.
great. So I guess just to sum up that kind of thing, it's like what I do is I look very carefully at what my use case is.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in the case of that server that we wrote for the Skyward project, we needed really robust, really reliable, very fast transfer of data and
Mm-hmm.
storage of telemetry data. And Elixir provided that. The other thing that is important to take into account is what do you need to do with it? So we knew this was temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it wasn't going to be a long-term thing because there's other factors, right? If we wrote this server in Elixir and nobody else at the company knew how to use Elixir,
Yeah.
then it's not going to be a very practical
Yeah. Yeah.
tool for
For the long
that
run,
use, right?
it will deteriorate and people will,
Yeah.
yeah, the architect. It's crazy how much software out there. People keep saying, hey, AI will be able to write software. And I'm like, majority of the projects I have done, I've had to like go in and like take over that something was
Yes.
developed like 10 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
It takes me more time to understand what is there than to redo the
Yeah.
whole thing again. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, it's just too risky to like just rip and replace, right? Like we
Yeah.
have to understand what is there, what was the business goal, what that developer was thinking. I think hopefully AI will get there someday where it can take existing code and make sense out of it. But
Yeah.
it's not easy.
It's not easy. And it's interesting that you bring that up because I think one of the limitations on our current LLM-based AIs is that really all it is a fancy word arranger, right? So from its training data, it sees how code is arranged And so it just follows that pattern. It's not it there's no real intelligence or thought in there. So it
Yeah.
doesn't know how to solve the problem. It
Mm-hmm.
just finds existing things in its training that
Ah,
seem similar and try to arrange it in a similar way.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And will it be able to read the code and speak with the director and make sense? Hey, why was something like this done?
Right.
Will it be able to like do both? We don't know.
Yeah. One of the funniest things, I'm a big fan of AI. So I also last year, always a side project again,
Ah,
there's an app that's on the App Store now called Flight Sense, and
okay.
it's an AI-based pilot training tool.
Oh, nice.
I worked on it with this guy, Taylor. Well, you can see on the Flight Sense, it's flightsense.ai is the site, and it's on the App Store. Um, but the group that I worked with was really great. And and it works very well. Basically, there's a RAG system on the back end that has all of the FAA documentation on flight training.
Hmm.
So you can ask the system anything about
Yeah.
airplanes, flight training, flight rules, instrumentation, things like that, and you'll get a solid answer. Um, and I worked on the initial MVP of it, things like, the interface with the API to do
Hmm.
the question and answer. But then one of the coolest features that was actually requested by flight instructors is an automated debriefing transcription,
Hmm.
where, after a training flight, the pilot in command, the instructor would have to write down all the notes and talk to the student about it. But now they just hit a button in the Flight Sense app, records their whole dialogue between instructor and student, sends it up to OpenAPI's Whisper API,
Hmm.
and then transcribes it and summarizes it, and then that
Nice.
goes into the notes in the Flight Sense
Yeah.
log. And it was a really great experience. It was my first actual practical application working with AI endpoints and things like that. It's
Yeah.
a really great app. And it was the most fun thing that I'd worked on in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such a great group of people. So yeah, it's kind of that kind of application I think is really good for AI. It does
Yeah.
it very well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Do
the
you have
guys
like,
had
yeah, like kind of summarizing stuff,
yeah,
understanding meaning of a conversation, right? If it has the full recording of everything, see,
yeah,
it does a really good job of summarizing of
yeah.
things. Yeah, and
So that was a really effective thing. But I would not want an LLM based AI to pilot my airplane.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think we're
Yeah.
not ready for that
We are
yet.
not ready either, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's a great supportive assistant
Yeah.
still but we still need someone human to still uh, live with every all the craziness that we in the reality
Yeah.
around us is there, right? So yeah, and I can
Yeah.
relate with that because when I was doing my private pilot lessons, I was like, yeah, I wish there was I would get a summary of this. I could get like
Yeah.
yeah, like it was my second flight, and the instructor was like, "Okay, go ahead, take off." I was like, "Oh, holy crap! I did I did not do my homework. I did not even read the chapter that I was supposed to read. You really want me to take off?" And I was like, "Yeah,
That's great. That's a great story. I
yeah."
love
But
it.
then I was like, if I would get this is like 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, when none of these tools were existed, right? So
Yeah.
I had to like read a book, go through
Yeah.
very little info even on YouTube about anything. Yeah.
Yeah, now there's so much. There's so
Oh
many
yeah.
YouTubes and things like that. But yeah, so I really pay attention to AI, where it's going. I think it's a great tool for brainstorming. That's where I've had my most, other than Flight Sense, the
Mhm.
my personal use of AI has been really great for brainstorming.
Mhm.
Um, but even you know, with my knowledge and things like that, it's very easy to see where the AI gets lost.
Mhm.
And you have to watch it. So I don't rely on it to do things. It
Mhm.
can spark ideas. It can give me a starting point, maybe. It can
Mhm.
make another thought occur to me.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really not as reliable as I would have hoped for actually doing things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
I
it's
think
it's
I think it's a great progress of where it is today, but it's not going to replace a human being. Not anytime
yeah,
soon. It's still
yeah.
still a little while away, for sure.
I read something funny. I wish I could attribute it to the person who authored it, but I think it was on LinkedIn where someone said, I wanted AI to wash the dishes and do my laundry while I write poetry, but
Yeah.
instead AI is writing poetry while I do the laundry and wash the dishes.
Yeah, yeah. I think the next big thing is going to be mix of robotics and AI when that merges a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I could definitely use a additional help in my house. I'm doing the same repetitive things every single day.
Yeah, yeah, it's isn't that what computers and
Yeah,
stuff are for, right? Is to
yeah,
handle those repetitive tasks that are too boring for precious humans.
yeah. Cool, cool. Coming back to iOS, like, where do you see the industry in the next 5 years? Like, is it a lot more of AI that's happening? Is there what like within mobile development? Uh, where do you see AI integrating? Like, I know AI has like its own special use cases for lots of different things. What are you
Yeah.
seeing between with like a hybrid between AI and iOS development?
That's a great question. I see people incorporating AI capabilities more and more into their applications.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a natural thing. Like your CRM example,
Yeah.
instead of you having to manually set up a filter, the
Yeah.
criteria, perhaps you could just tell it or it would
Mhm,
learn over time. The
mhm.
one thing that I think we've missed as an industry over the last 50 years, literally, is that computers were supposed to kind of start to know us and
Yeah.
anticipate our needs. And I think
Yeah.
there's not enough of that in applications and things
Yeah.
like that, where it kind of learns a pattern. Like I do the same exact things on my phone. And I know Apple is touting Siri as being able to do this. And I do notice some
Yeah.
limited things that Siri will notice. Oh, you probably are going to bed now, or
Yeah.
you always turn your volume off at this time, um, but there's not enough of that. So I do
Yeah.
give credit to Apple for at least acknowledging that this was something that we've always wanted.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, but we need a lot more work in that, and that seems to me like something a benefit of AI integration. So not just the data, but observing the behaviors, uh,
Yeah.
and helping to automate
Yeah.
automatically, you
Mhm.
know. I think that's something that really needs to happen.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Another area, I think, from the developer side, um, I think it would be very nice if I don't want AI necessarily to write my code, but I'd
Mhm.
like AI to point out some edge cases that maybe I didn't think of.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
one, and again, Apple is really at the forefront of this, but not enough people consider things like accessibility um,
Mhm.
and usability when they're actually putting something together. A great example in my personal experience, my first assignment at Bluevine, I was the new guy. Give him something easy. It was going to be a terms of service update. So when the person logs in, it just pops up a window. It says, there are new terms of service. Do you accept? Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. After setting with the product manager for a day, a couple hours, I identified at least 12 edge cases that hadn't been
Mhm.
handled. Um,
Yeah.
and one of them, for example, was what if somebody, while I'm logged in on my phone, somebody logs in on web, accepts the terms there?
Yeah.
Then what
Yeah.
happens on the phone? Like, how do we know? And the
Yeah.
backend guys, they had to change everything. So it became very complicated.
Yeah.
And it was only because I like to break things that I was able to sit there and break this design by saying,
Yeah.
what about this? What about this? What about this? We have to handle this. We have to handle this. We have to handle this. So I think
Yeah.
that can go a long way to anticipating user experience bugs, right?
Mhm.
If someone is watching now, it's like, okay, you've implemented this button, you've implemented this filter. What
Mhm.
about this case? What if somebody does this?
Yeah.
What if the user does this?
Yeah.
You need
Yeah.
a case to handle that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I think the ability, it's not only the integration of AI within the product, within the app itself, it's also the integration of AI within the development process,
yeah.
right? So that will be the next big thing happening I think over the next 5 to 7 years, probably.
Yeah. I think it's coming. And it's actually where I've run into the limitations of the LLM based Gen AI
Hmm.
is it doesn't anticipate. It can't, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't think ahead because it doesn't think. It can only respond
Yeah.
to
To a prompt.
pulling out data. Yeah. To
It
me,
starts from a prompt.
Yeah, to me, it's a supercharged Stack Overflow. That's really what the
Yeah,
LLM Gen AI is, because rather than going through a dozen Stack Overflow posts to try to find the answer I need, it
yeah,
will find it very quickly. And
yeah,
so it saves me time.
yeah,
And I do appreciate that. I do think it's an improvement,
yeah,
but we're not to the point where it's even AI to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wish it has moods and emotions and
Now that might get a little scary.
we'll be in trouble. That's when we will be in trouble.
Yeah,
Today I
definitely.
want to write some code quickly.
I
I'm
worked on a
going to write a
project.
3-line code versus a 10-line code.
Yeah, I worked on a project that was during my freelance time. It was a guy trying to start up. He made a stuffed bear, a toy, stuffed animal, and it had a Bluetooth chip in it. And
Mhm.
so the child could speak commands to it. And this is just when the iPhone had just come out. And the speech to text would go across the Bluetooth to the phone,
Mhm.
and it would pull out from pre-canned responses and then go
Yeah,
back to the bear. So the actual toy was very cheap because the Bluetooth connection was the only
yeah,
thing expensive. It had no, processing power on it. That was
yeah,
all going to be the phone. So this guy
yeah.
was ahead of his time in
Nice. Yeah.
offloading the processing thing. But I remember thinking, it's like, oh man, is this the start of the terrifying AI apocalypse, right? Where you're
Yeah.
talking to your toy gets angry, it starts talking back to you.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't put legs on that toy.
That's a good way. Yeah,
That's great.
it's
So
really
yeah,
great.
we are almost at the end of this episode, this very special episode. Before we conclude, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience?
Um, Yeah, just I know from like I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media person, but I do like LinkedIn because of the professional connection nature. And the thing that's at the top of everyone's mind is the current state of the hiring
Oh
in
yeah,
tech, especially with all
yeah,
the layoffs. I know lots of people that have been impacted by that. It's really hard. A lot of the people I follow on LinkedIn that are out there helping others, the thing they recommend the most, and I agree with, is to network. So I always like to offer if there's any help I can provide to connect people, to help people find their new opportunities. Um, I do feel that there will be a resurgence in a few years when all of us have to fix the vibe coded apps that are out there.
yeah,
Uh, kind of like when the COBOL stuff in
yeah,
1999, they had to get the guys out of retirement to come back and fix it.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's a really tough time. I just want to acknowledge that.
yeah.
I feel things, what everyone's going through, and if there's any way to help, I'd be really
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah, and I just keep saying like the best of the innovation happens when the times are tough, right? Like there will
It's
be
true.
something new that will come up that will be like transforming everything that's going on. It could
Yeah,
be so, it could be AI, it could be something completely new that we have not even thought about. And
right.
someone that's
Exactly.
not spending 40 to 80 hours doing something that's just giving them a salary, they might be able to use the resources and tools. Don't push against the economic forces. Take the time off. Keep doing what needs to be done. But if you have a little extra time, develop some app. Develop something that's cool, useful, that solves a
Yeah.
real problem in an industry that you are working in. Right? It could
Yeah.
it could be something that just helps you when you get the job.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another thing too, to gain new and different experiences is very valuable. They always inform. Like I mentioned earlier, my experience in the game industry has been invaluable in other areas.
Yeah.
So, going out to like my niece, she's gone into horticulture and is learning how to be like a park ranger, right?
Wow.
Because it's such a different perspective. And I
Yeah.
think those kinds of things are great. I worked with a guy who got so frustrated with tech, he decided to bake bread.
Mhm.
So he became a bread baker. And
I'm
it
going
gives
for
you
it.
it gives you a really great new perspective. I was
Yeah.
thinking about bartending myself personally, but
Oh yeah. Yeah. That will be a
great
nice
fun.
nice cool thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, especially, when I'm retired, go to the islands, just serve people drinks and enjoy the sunshine.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's an art is a never-ending skill, right? Like there is it's been around for so long. I'm sure there's bartending, but there is still so much new that can be done within
Oh
it.
yeah, absolutely.
There could be a small change in the recipe that could make a new drink that's favorite of a lot of people.
Yeah. And the one area that one last thing I'll mention, one area where I do see the combination of all this happening is indie games. The
Mhm.
number of indie games released year over year for the last few years, it's
Yeah.
growing so fast. And I think it's because people with very unique experiences want
Hmm.
to create something that allows them to share some of those experiences. And
Yeah.
there's no better way to do it than a game.
Hmm.
So getting started on indie games, I think, is one of the best outlets for people that need to express themselves. I think it's
Yeah.
just such a powerful medium, and it's not. We haven't seen the full realization of it yet. So I think
Yeah.
there's still a lot for people to add, to innovate, to create, and
Hmm.
provide new experiences. I think it's really a great time to do that.
Yeah, that is amazing. So, what's the best way somebody can reach you? Like, can they reach out to you on LinkedIn for learning more about indie games?
Yeah, definitely. I can send you my LinkedIn thing. If you want to put it
Sure.
there, or it's Karlo Kilayko, which you're not going to be able to spell on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. But yeah, I'd be very happy to for people to reach out. I'm happy to give advice, or like I said, to network them with anybody I know that can
Mhm.
help them progress. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds perfect. There's like even within real estate, I think about so many innovative things, and I'm like, oh my God, how will I be able to develop this? But I now I know like I have somebody to reach out who can at
Yeah.
least guide me in the right direction and see what needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah. It's what I did for like 10 years as a freelancer. It comes naturally to me. Um, I also tell people all the time that I'm the oldest of five kids, so I know how to herd the cats.
Yeah, that's the most important skill.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds great. Thanks for joining on a busy Friday. Thanks for joining and sharing your valuable insights and your experience with our audience.
I'm very, very happy to do so, Amish. And thank you for having me. You've been a tremendous host. I appreciate your generosity, and I wish you also really good luck. I think your podcast is really great, and people can get a lot out of it.
Oh yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Main Street Minds. Want to share your journey with our audience? Head over to mainstreetmindspodcast.com/guest to apply.